he's a really difficult person to have a debate with, because even though he has a little annoying voice, and he's essentially he's a lawyer, so he's really good at arguing points and stuff like that. And not for nothing, I actually enjoy listening to his show, because I've said this time and time again, I like to listen to those trains, how they get to those points of thought, like what his thought process is, right, why he does those things. And I've listened to him enough on his own podcast as well as Joe Rogan's podcast to understand that he doesn't have the same upbringing or understanding of either struggle or just the way we were raised. Mm-hmm. And he thinks because he can read some laws or he thinks it very black and whitish. I don't know if that's too harsh to say, but he doesn't understand the way we grew up and the other underlying factors. It's not just, it's because there's crime here or because,
Does it make sense to say that maybe he's well educated but morally misguided?
I'm not one to talk about people's morals, because I don't think he's a bad guy.
It's more so just things he wasn't exposed to. It's not really his morals.
Right.
It's essentially what he doesn't know, the ignorance.
Yeah. You can't expect everybody to know everything. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a huge problem, especially in a space where you're the center of attention. Like having your own show and being on the Joe Rogan podcast, like everybody knows who you are. Mm-hmm. And for you to pick such a strong opposition to something that's going against the grain, that most spaces like, instead of aligning yourself, you go against the grain. And to be in that position, I think it's a little bit of ignorance, because they don't know. No, even if they I think I'd like to have them on just to try to help. I don't even want to change their mind, but I just want them to understand that it's not as simple as they think it is. Mm-hmm. There's so many factors. And people always have this, one size fits all solution, and it's never that easy. So I would like people like that to be on. I'd like some more conservative thoughts, because some conservatives have some really good ideas. They just don't understand how their ideas are going to affect people who may not have been brought up socially the way they have, And
I would say that that's probably one of your reasonings and motivations for starting this podcast, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
to be able to speak on those lesser heard viewpoints or lesser understood viewpoints.
Yeah, I don't think silence is any way, that's one criticism of the left that I really hate, is how much they want to silence people, because that's not how you progress. That's not how you bring an understanding. You can't debate somebody if you don't even understand what their stances are, right, or how they got there.
It's just a shouting match at that point.
Yeah,
it's not a debate.
It's just picking sides, and that's not how these things work.
So you mentioned progressing, and would you consider yourself to be moving at a comfortable pace for yourself as far as where you see this podcast going and where it came from? Are you enjoying the pace?
I think the pace could be picked up. I find myself being a little lazy. I think I could honestly put more time into it, and just with life and everything going on, I sometimes let it fall to the wayside, and I don't put as much effort as I should. And I think that's why I'm not where I want to be yet. I'm happy with the growth, of course, but it could be much more for sure.
Now, keeping it in the beginning stages of this podcast here, how did you come up with the name? And obviously, I know what it means. I feel like we've already harped on it a couple of times, what it means. But can you give a description for people? Even describe the logo, because for some reason, people think it's a beer.
Yeah. People think it's a beer because there's two limes. One has, as if it still has a leaf on it from the vine that it was picked off of. And the other one has what looks like you would screw in a bulb that, what would you call that? I don't even know what you call that.
I couldn't even guess a word. Oh wait, that's the threading.
Yeah, the threading of a bulb, and it's two limes. They're green and they're shining lights, cross lights, kind of like stage lights,
Hollywood style.
Yeah,
imagery.
And under the lights, it says Limelight Highlight. So pretty much, I came up with the name and the idea because I wanted to highlight positive people doing positive things and bring them into the limelight. Because everybody talks about, you hear it in pop culture, you hear it in rap. Everybody wants to be in the limelight. The limelight is something, especially in today's climate. Everybody wants to be insta famous. Everybody wants to be the center of attention. The next big YouTube star, the next big TikToker, podcaster, whatever social media or entertainment space. Everybody wants to be in that light. They want to be highlighted for what they're doing. I just so happen to want to highlight positive people instead of like world star. You see rappers doing all these stupid things, being, just being in the spotlight for saying something dumb. Trolling. Yeah, pretty much. I think that type of action and those types of actions shouldn't be rewarded with attention. We should kind of just be, when people do stupid things like that, we should just not pay attention to them at all. It's like giving a kid candy after they throw, a tantrum. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to the lesser of. I've said this before too. In the podcast with Hennessy, talking about
shout out to G Talk.
Talking about how the analytics on social media is all about terrible news. It's about negative things. We still have the Enlightened Heathens page from when I was a podcaster with the Enlightened Heathens, and we got 47,000 followers. And I share my podcast, the Positive Podcast, and it gets 2 likes. And it's like, it's not because those people don't want to like it. It's because it's not even in their feed because of how skewed and screwed up the analytics are. And it's only going to show one way. So it's an uphill battle, but I think it's one worth fighting.
I feel like you already answered it within your previous answer. But, you spoke on your intentions and you spoke on how you like to promote it. But how would you like it to be received? Meaning like, all right, the person, your listener, finishes this episode here. What do you want their next thought process to be? What do you hope for their next, motivation to be, intentions to be after listening to a complete episode or maybe even 5 episodes? They sat down and really got a lot of information from you. How do you want that to all be received?
I'd like their focus to change from the idea that everybody on social media has to have money, or you got to flaunt jewelry, or you got to be successful. I want their mindset to be more like, what can I focus on that's positive? I've said this again too. You are what you ingest. You're going to continue to look at bad news. You're going to feel like shit. You're going to eat bad. You're going to feel like shit. Whatever it is that's influencing you, whether you're conscious of it or not, you're going to feel crappy. It's like listening to a feel-good song. Music changes our mood all the time. If you hear about sad-ass music, you're just going to feel sad as shit. So for people who are listening now or, listening to 5 of my podcasts in a row, whatever it is, what I'd like to get out of them is their viewpoint changes to focus on more positive things and to pass the information along that could help somebody, like the Innocence Project. Like the fact that one of the episodes I shared in, I think, food security, there was a neighborhood fridge that people would stock. Take what you want, leave what you can. Just community stuff like that, where some people who live in these areas might not know, and now they listen to this because it's free and it's accessible, and now they know, and you might be helping somebody.
And as we learned, community means what?
Common unity. We all live in the same space. I don't understand why it's so hard for us to get along and help each other.
And kind of what you were saying about how some people will be really into themselves about how much money they have or anything or something of that nature. That kind of goes against common unity, because if you do have more means, more resources, share it with your fellow man. Don't rub it in his face. Don't, make it seem like he's lesser of a person or she's lesser of a person because they don't have that. You should be, embracing them with your opportunities and showing them that we can come together for the common unity. I like to think that, especially in Philly, not so much everywhere else in the country that I can speak on, but in Philly you can have a block in the middle of the hood, middle of the suburbs, that on one end of it, someone is poor, barely getting by. And then up at the other end of the block, you might have somebody with the most lavish house possible. The same size as your house, but he's got a decked out sofa, TVs, and everything. But you're still neighbors. You still deal with the same issues, regardless of how much is in your pocket. So common unity is definitely something that needs to be promoted and received.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that point, that's not to say like, hey, if you got money or you're in a better position than everybody else, make yourself poor by giving away your money. People like to take things to the extreme, and I think that's one of the extremes. People will always say like, well, I made it myself or I earned it myself. Why, if I can do it, that person can do it. But that's not always the case, because everybody has a different upbringing, different circumstances that made them who they are. Mm-hmm. And some people legit cannot do those things that you did. Just because you did them doesn't mean, physically, maybe, yeah, physically, if we want to get down to the nitty gritty, they are able to, that old saying, pick themselves up by their bootstraps. But some people just can't do it, and some people won't do it. And that's okay too. It's not something to spit in their face and make fun of them about. It's just some people have better circumstances than others, and that's just what it is. It doesn't mean you can't help somebody else.
If you could make another podcast as well as the Limelight Highlight podcast, what would it be like? What would it be about?
I'd probably be similar to the Enlightened Heathens. Just because as positive as I'd like to be, I also, like everyone else, I do like the drama, in the sense of like, it's entertaining. I like talking about sports. I like talking about music, pop culture, politics. I like talking about all that stuff, and I like kind of being facetious a lot. And I think in this space, to do that, it would go against what the message I'm trying to share is. So I wouldn't do that in this space, just because I have a goal with this podcast. I do it in another podcast, which is perfectly fine because there's a time and place for that. But in this one, I wouldn't do that so much, just because it goes against what I'm trying to do with it, But
would you be worried, or would you kind of dial yourself back, knowing that you have the balance between the two, or would you be just accepting that people should be able to differentiate the two different purposes? I think
what you said, them differ. I think if they can't differentiate the purpose of the two podcasts, one, you're going to go there for a specific thing, and the other, you're not going to get that there because that's not what it is. Mm-hmm. If they can't differentiate the two, then I'm not even worried about it, because they're not smart enough to do so, to be honest.
Can you speak on the Enlightened Heathens really briefly? Just who you worked with, how long it lasted, how many episodes it ran, and that type of content, what it means to you, and why that was so exciting for you to get into at that point in time.
Yeah, so I work with Ramon and Zeke with the Enlightened Heathens. I think we did like 20-something episodes. I don't even remember really. But
Zeke Jones, for the people who may not be able to remember, he was on an episode maybe a couple months back.
Yeah, pretty much basically after the George Floyd incident. Yeah. Zeke Jones, Ramon Lopez, they were my co-host on the Enlightened Heathens, and we honestly were just playing it by ear. We wanted to be produced in the sense of like sounding professional, but also we wanted to do our own thing. We got real sloppy. There was some real bad messes with some of the stuff we said, especially in today's climate. But it was fun because we were just three friends talking, just bullshitting on a podcast. And it's not like this one where, we talk about a lot of serious topics, even though we can still have fun with it. It's not as this isn't as relaxed and laid back as that was, because that one you could say the most off the wall shit and it didn't matter. And you had, two other co-hosts, which means I could just chill and they could kind of like take the show off too. So, but that was exciting because it was the first time I got used to talking. in the sense of there's people listening to me.
It was necessary to be a part of the Enlightened Heathens to be